everybody. Purpok here, and welcome back to another episode of Race the Ramen, the show where I attempt to review something unscripted in the amount of time it takes to boil an instant ramen. And today we'll be taking a look at the Tragedy of Macbeth, showing now in theaters and on Apple TV+. Alright, we're going to start the timer right now. Okay, so, the Tragedy of Macbeth. This is an adaptation of Shakespeare's original play, Macbeth, the famous tragedy, his shortest tragedy in terms of length, about the man who would become the King of Scotland through a succession of encouraged murders at the hands of his wife. And, it's been adapted dozens and dozens of, probably hundreds of times, because it's Shakespeare. And Shakespeare's public domain, and it's old as fuck, so of course there's been plenty of people who have adapted his incredibly, inspirational and influential works of literature. And there's people who have mixed or, not so positive opinions on Shakespeare, and I get why. I mean, it's really dry, a lot of it. His work is not created equal. Some plays are better than others. As someone who's read a lot of it and been in a few Shakespeare things, I've actually been fortunate enough to see Shakespeare performed live at the Globe Theatre in the UK. I'm by no means an expert, really I'm not, but I feel like I know a little more than maybe the average person does about Shakespeare. And I feel like that enhanced my enjoyment of this specific adaptation of Macbeth. Because the big thing about Shakespeare is that the dialect, the vocabulary, his flowery, old-timey Shakespearean language is so dense, from just an intended meaning kind of way, and just nonsensical to the average modern person, that just hearing it, and especially just reading it in a book, doesn't do it justice. Shakespeare is not meant to be read, it's meant to be acted out, to have the emotions drive the dialogue and the characters. That's what makes Shakespeare distinct as it is. And I think that's why this adaptation of Macbeth really works. This was directed by Joel Coen, one of the two Coen brothers, who normally direct their projects together. Stuff like Burn After Reading, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I think they did A Serious Man and Ballad of Buster Scruggs, stuff like that. You've probably seen one of their movies, and I'm not sure, but this is maybe Joel Coen's first solo project, the only one I know of. And he nails it. The presentation is fantastic. It's an old 4:3 kind of aspect ratio, black and white, very minimal set design, and the way the visuals are done. Nothing is crazy overblown. Everything feels minimalistic without looking uninteresting. It manages to capture the feeling you might get of actually seeing a performance of a Shakespeare play in a well-constructed stage set. There's a lot of the vibe I get from this is almost in the set design is old Star Trek almost, and I don't mean that as an insult. Everything is very simply laid out, and a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the acting holding up the scenes, and the lighting and the use of the camera angles to take full advantage of the not limited number of sets, but it's a small number of sets. They don't make the story overly complicated or distract from what's important by cramming the frame full of unnecessary visuals. They just let the amazing performances stand on their own and just carry pretty much the whole thing, along with, again, the great presentation to carry it all along. And what I really like, and I was alluring to all of this, is that this version manages to, while not changing the Shakespearean dialogue much at all as far as I can understand, the dialogue is almost exactly the same as it is in Macbeth. But it's, again, the performances, the emotional inflection, and the body language and expressions of the characters helps convey the meaning of this dialogue a lot more clearly than just the dialogue by itself. It's the visual language of the film, and the way that the people are interacting and behaving. It makes all of these major points much clearer. You're a lot less confused than you might be in a less enthusiastic or plainly presented version of the story. And I know that Shakespeare isn't for everybody. I mean, I don't expect it to be for everybody, but I've really found myself pretty impressed by this. I've barely even talked about the performances, but the two main characters are obviously Denzel Washington as Macbeth, who is fantastic as a man just losing his mind the whole time. Same basically goes for Frances McDormand, who's probably even better. She acts her fucking ass off. The "is this a dagger" scene and the "out damn spot" scene are fantastic. Everything's pretty great. I can't really highlight any weak performances or shots that took me out of it or anything, and there's even a few small jokes which don't feel out of place either. It's a really great movie, honestly. Hopefully that gives you a decent impression of what I think of the movie. I know I talked a lot more about the way that Shakespeare was presented in this adaptation than some specifics of the movie itself, but that really is the thing that carries it. It's just a really well presented, really well acted, very well translated to the modern screen and modern day, without butchering it really, adaptation of a very old, influential piece of work. And while Macbeth isn't like my favorite Shakespeare story or anything, I'm just like, it's another one. I thought this was a really well done, engaging, and fun, cool way to tell the story. And I absolutely recommend you check it out if you want to see a Shakespeare movie that maybe gets your attention more than others have before, or if you just want a really good movie. Joel Coen's The Tragedy of Macbeth gets a 10 out of 10. I really don't have a lot of major complaints with it. I really enjoyed it, and I might even watch it again. Can't say that about a lot of other Shakespeare adaptations. But yeah, Shakespeare can be neat sometimes. Are we at that point in culture yet where we can expect people to make like video essays or where it's like, Shakespeare is good, actually?